All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is 9:02. Good morning, everyone. Yep.
Good morning.
Hey, Michelle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Trying to figure out how to open my screen.
Uh-oh.
It's not working for me this morning.
Yeah, that's Zoom decided they wanted to do an update on this. So it took me a second there. Get in. But we're okay. Technology is awesome. Awesome. All right, to make this work, this is NAR RPR. For those of you that are not familiar with it, to have access to it, you have to be a realtor. It's not a public site. It's designed just for us. One of the issues that we have with it, though, is that every MLS can decide how they want to run things. So in some cases, MLSs have it restricted where you cannot see all the information. You can only see, you like San Antonio, for example, I can see that the property sold, but I cannot see what it sold for, just as an example, because their MLS has limitations on it. It doesn't make any sense to me, but that's the way it works. So anyway, so this was designed for RPRs for new agents. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll do what I can to help you with it. But at the same time, just out of curiosity, how many of you already have RPR set up and use it on a regular basis? Anybody? You can throw the answer in the chat, or you can unmute and jump in.
I do.
Okay, Laura, you're using it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Thanks, ma'am.
I do not. I'm brand new, so this is all new to me.
All right. You already have are you already registered with the board, Ruby?
I just took my exam on Thursday and I got fingerprinted, so
Awesome.
I'm not.
Yeah, ready to rock and roll. Good deal.
Yep. Thank you.
Good. All right, so what you'll see is what I have planned, that's what I was working on this morning, is going through now to the end of the year, some additional things with some things that are going on within the company as well. I'm going to add more RPR to our regular schedule and zip forms and some other things as well on the tech side. But I'm working on that. We should have something ironed out on it by the end of the week or first part of next week. And I'll push that schedule out to you guys. By the way, one of the things that I'd like to share with you, just real quick, if I could, how many of you are using Google Calendar? And some of you have heard me ask this before. Michelle, you're using it. If you're using Google Calendar and you're not on there with RE/MAX Elite training, if you'll shoot me an email with your email, so I just put my email address in the chat. If you'll shoot me an email with your email address, what I'll do is I can share that calendar with you, and it covers all the RE/MAX training. So you have access to it. If you're using Google Calendar, it makes it really easy. And I'll to show that just real quick, and then we'll jump into RPR as well. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so we can go ahead and get started, but I'm going to show Google Calendar real quick, and then we'll go into RPR from there. So on the screen, you should have the calendar. So everybody should have that. Let me open this back up. Make sure we have this so we can work with it. Once again, if you have anything to add or any questions or anything, just jump in with it. On the Google Calendar, one of the things I want to show you was that if I have your email address right here where it says RE/MAX training, RE/MAX Elite training, that's the overall company training, right? As you can see, I have several calendars, but so what happens is I just click on this and I go to settings and I share and add you in here so that you have access to this calendar. And then what happens is, just like I have access to, let me take off some of the other things here real quick. 9. There you go. I have access to Texas Realtors calendar, education calendar. So I click on that, for example, you see how it populated into the calendar. If there's something there I want to take, let's say I wanted to take this marketing strategy course tomorrow. All I do is I click on it and then go to the 3 little dots here, and then I can copy it over into my schedule wherever I want to put it at. And it makes it so much easier. So the reason I show you that is because once I add you to the RE/MAX training schedule, RE/MAX Elite training schedule, you'll be able to do the same thing. You'll have it on the side. If you're using Google Calendar, you'll have it on the side. You'll click on, you'll click on it to add it to your calendar here, but then click here, click on the 3 buttons and to copy it over into wherever you want it. That way you don't have to have it on all the time. You only have it on for the things you want. Like for example, today's schedule, we had the new agent training with RPR. If you wanted that, you could put that on your schedule. Or Monday we did the new agent business planning, or yesterday it was finding your market, which finding your market is one of the areas that a lot of agents miss. And it actually took me a while. Actually, I licensed in 97. In 2001 was the first time I heard anybody talk about finding your market area. And it's one of the reasons why I always share that. But anyway, we're going to jump into RPR. And for those of you that have used it, some of this is going to be repetitive. If you've not used it, it's the basics for it. I just recently taught 4 hours of RPR with, or 5 hours of RPR with the Radio Association. And I did the basic, the mobile, and the advanced. And on the mobile, you can add this to your phone and should add it to your phone because you can do everything we do online. You can do that on your phone. So to get us started, one of the things, once you log in, it's narrpr.com, and you're not going to be able to get in unless you have a NERDS number and you're a member of MLS. So that's up front. You have to be a member of MLS to be able to get in first and foremost. Once you have that, you can go in and get set up. So you just go to narrpr.com, and it's ran by NAR, National Association of Realtors. It's only for realtors. The information that's in this site is pulled, it's nationwide, and it's pulled from over 300 different platforms. And with that being said, we're going to talk about some values and stuff with it as well, real quick. But there's a lot of information in here you can use. I would just also ask you to look at how you're planning on using it so that we make sure that we're getting some benefit out of it, and so is the consumer. So the first setup thing is this little sprocket on the upper right-hand corner. The little sprocket that's on the upper right-hand corner, you click on that, and that takes you to your profile. And you want to go in here and make sure all your information's up to date. Upload a photo, upload a logo. If you don't have a RE/MAX Elite logo, let me know and I can share that with you. Kayla, Norma's daughter, is the one that handled the marketing on this, and they put these together so that we can use those. You need the logo in here because it's going to go on all your documents. Anyway, so you go in and make sure everything is all set up. Make sure you have your website put in here, things that you need, right? And then you want to add your MLS. If you're a member of more than one MLS, you can have more than one in here, which gives you a little better perspective on what's going on. Just like I said, in San Antonio, I do a lot of teaching in San Antonio. I don't have access to their MLS. If I did, I'd be able to see all the real numbers up there. Anyway, to do that, all you have to do is you go in here and you're going to need your MLS ID number, just like it says right here, right? Your MLS ID number. And then you select the MLS that you're working from. So you go to the state portion of it. You go to the MLS that you belong to. For example, if we were Corpus Christi, probably Coastal Bend MLS. I think it might be that one, right? And when you put that in there, then you're going to have to enter in your MLS ID number and so forth. And since I'm not a member there, I don't have that access to that one either. And when it comes up, you'll get once it's all online, everything's together, you'll get a little green check by your name, just like this one is here. And that's an important part, because if it's not green, that means it's not functioning the way it's supposed to, and you want it to function the way it's supposed to. Anytime you need help, I'll show you later on where you can get help with this as well. You can always shoot me a text or an email and I'll do what I can to help you with it. But the help on this is available 24 hours a day from their helpline. Anytime you put your cursor over the little blue dot with the information icon, if you will, it'll tell you what you're looking for. And this again emphasizes the green check is so important. You put your license number in, any designations that you have, those are not certifications, they're designations, and there is a difference. So you put those in here, and then down at the bottom, do you want updates and do you agree, and hit save. That part of it is real important that you get all that set up on that side so that you have that. On the right-hand side, one of the things you want to do on the right-hand side, so again, right here's where your NRDS number would be, right? So you're going to need that. That is your National Association Realtors number. That's the number. It's like the old service number. It stays with you for life. It doesn't go away. And everything NAR does is based on that number. It never changes. Even if you let your license expire and you come back, you'll have that same number. It stays with you. But down here at the bottom is where you want to connect. And you want to connect your mobile devices that you're using. You want to connect your mobile devices, and you can have as many as you want. And you want to connect zip forms. So you have your mobile devices and you have your zip forms. And the reason that's important is because the mobile devices, if I'm out using my phone, looking at property, like sometimes when I travel, I'll look at RPR and see what's available. And based on my phone. And if I see something I like or something an investor might like or something like that, I might tag it, star. It has a star on there. So you click on the star and that indicates you like it, right? And it's going to save it. If I do that on my phone, when I come back to my desktop, it's going to be there as well because they're linked together, right? And then of course, zip forms, if you're using zip form, this is going to link to your zip form. That is the normal zip form. It's not the company account zip form, right? And I'm working on trying to get that set up so that we can have that. Right now, that's not available. A company account is a separate account and it has like a shell built around it where our normal zip forms is provided as a benefit of NAR and Texas Realtors. And that's a separate individual account. And when I click on that, that's what opens. It doesn't open up into the company account, which is what we would want it to do. All right, so that's the basic profile setup. Your settings, when you take a look at your settings, if you guys have any questions, just jump in there, unmute and jump in. But on the settings, what do you want to see? And this is really important in some cases because like our MLS does not provide some information. And like, for example, if there's a price change on a property or if a property came back on the market, the price change, for example, there's not a way to flag a property in our MLS. I'm talking about the McAllen MLS. There's not a way to flag a property where if there's a price change, I get notified. There's not a possibility of doing that in MLS. The Navica has that. That's the agents that are at Rio Grande Valley MLS, RGV MLS. They have that, for example. They have Navica, and that has that in there. So I use, and so do several other agents. We use our RPR to do that for us. So I can go into our RPR on the mobile version and set it so that if I get a notification, I like a property, and if a property I like has a price reduction, I'll get an email telling me about it. And you can do that again on your mobile portion of RPR, which is what you want to work with as well. Anyway, you go in here and you set your settings, your home areas, right? Set up your home area. What is your home area? And you can add to this if you need to, any way you want to, if there's anything specific you're looking for. Any questions there? Right, so the basic concept in here, we're not going to be able to obviously cover everything with RPR. The basic thing is you can look up a property, right? So you have all properties, and that's all properties anywhere in the United States. So for example, looking up a property in Kansas, for example. So you can do that, and this is actually where I grew up at. Yep, that's it, just like that. Um, so that's out in the middle of nowhere, right? Um, and obviously our family hasn't owned that for a long time, but that was the main home address way back in the day. You can look at property anywhere in the United States. However, please keep in mind that if you're working with somebody that, as a real estate agent, we're only licensed in the state of Texas, so we can only work with that. And our policy and procedures manual says that we need to stay within our MLS area. Anything outside of that, you might want to talk to Nora Hinojosa about that. But I share that with you because I have used that working with investors. For example, one of the investors bought a property in Virginia. He asked me to take a look at some property, see what I thought about it. I looked at it based on what RPR was saying. You know, if you're buying it in Texas, this is what I would advise you, type of thing. And I also, my youngest sister had bought a house down by Galveston, wanted to buy a house down by Galveston. So I was able to go in and pull up some properties in Galveston, connect her with an agent and a specific property so that she can make that transaction work. So you can use it all over the nation. Just be careful and make sure you're not giving out advice and opinions on different things. Under the all properties part of it, again, you can do searches. It works just like MLS in a lot of ways, where you can go in here and do a search for a variety of properties. Depending on what you're looking for. It even has, and this is one of the things I was talking about yesterday, or yeah, I think it was yesterday. I don't know. Anyway, the keyword search, you can go in here and do a keyword search for properties. If you're looking for properties in Harlingen that have a pool, if that's in the public records, it's going to show up. So it'd be in the public records if it's on their tax rolls, right? On their property tax statements, it would be there. So I could actually plug that in and come up with some. Just as an example, oh, I don't want that address. And we just do the quick keyword search for it and see what comes up. There may or may not be any. Sometimes you have to play with it to see what kind of information you can get out of it. But generally speaking, just like MLS, it's going to give you something most of the time. And it may take a bit because it's sorting through a bunch of records as well.
Matt, can you do a search via school district?
Sure. Yes. Absolutely. And I'll show you a couple ways to do that just real quick. All right, so I was just trying to show you how that's working. The internet this morning is a little slow, so it'll actually pull up properties that have a pool in Harlingen. As long as the pool's on the tax records, right? In other words, the individual, like if my wife and I decided we wanted to put a pool in, one of the first things we have to do is get a permit to do that, right? After we find somebody to do it. Then we have to get a permit. When you get a permit, then it gets recorded, which causes it to show up on your tax records, your property tax records. And once that happens, then RPR is able to pull that because that's one of the platforms it pulls from. So to be able to identify it that way, and that's why it's taken a while. Okay, so in Harlingen, there's 833 properties with a pool, right? Which is pretty good when you think about it. If I was running a pool maintenance business, that might be pretty good information. But I just want to show you how the keyword works on it. There's a lot of opportunities there to look for stuff. So we have all properties. Remember that the advance is out here and there's a lot of ways you can use that as well. We have for sale. These are the ones that are actually listed with MLS. Actually listed with MLS. So this works like an MLS, if you will, because you can go in here and do a search for bed, bath, everything else. And again, this is another reason I like this a little better than MLS, which is kind of bad because I'm the MLS chair in McAllen. But in our area, just like Corpus Christi, this might be a better place for you to do a basic search for a buyer. And the reason for that is because you have MLSs that overlap. Here in Harlingen, for example, we have RGV MLS, we have the McAllen MLS, and we have South Padre. And we have agents from all three of those MLSs listing property all over the valley. You know, agents in South Padre have listings in McAllen. But because they're not a member of McAllen, it doesn't show up there. They'll show up in South Padre MLS, but not in the McAllen MLS. But if I go in here, I'll be able to see that it's on the market, no matter which MLS they belong to. Does that make sense? So you want to use this, especially if you're representing the buyer. You want to go in here so you can pull up all the properties that are available and then try to fine tune it from there. You may, on occasion, have to go back and forth between here and your MLS, but this works really well. You also have for lease. So they have rental properties in here. If you're looking for a rental property in the area, and it's listed with an MLS, so it's listed with an agent, or it's been put out on a public website, we may have that information in here as well. Then you have neighborhoods. So I can do a search for a neighborhood, and it's neighborhood, city, zip code, county. I can narrow this down where it's exact or within, right? So there's a lot of opportunity here. If I wanted to find a specific subdivision, I can find that here usually. And I may have to play with it again, depending on how it's recorded and spelled and everything else. But it'll allow you to actually take a look at the neighborhood. That's important because we're going to talk about reports in a little bit, and neighborhood reports give you all the stats. What's the list price, sales price ratio? What's the average days on the market? What's the education levels? What's the job? What do they seek as far as jobs in that area? It'll even break it down and tell you who they voted for in that area. So you know whether you're in a safe territory or not.
And that's only in neighborhoods?
Yeah, it shows up in neighborhoods, yes. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And then you have the schools. So here we can do a school. Now notice when I clicked on schools, it goes to geography. So we can do school districts if we want to. And if we're doing a school district, then I can actually decide whether, okay, I want a middle school. And I can plug in the city, the zip code, the county, whatever, and it'll do a search that way. It'll give you some options to work with. So you can actually look for the schools that way. And when you pull the schools up in here, it will, if there's ever been any public comments made about the school district or the school, those will show up. I've talked about it before in classes. I had a $700,000 property for sale in San Benito. And when I was doing this report on the school information, it pulled up one of the first comments on the schools was that teachers in San Benito care more about being friends with the kids instead of being teachers. And I used that when I did the presentation with the owner to tell them that, look, anybody with intelligence, somebody buying a home that's worth $700,000 is going to look at all the different information that's out there. They're going to see that this is not a good school district. They're not going to want their kids in the school district off comments like, and there was more than just one, but because of comments like this, they're going to go somewhere else probably. Unless the home is priced properly and all this other good stuff. But anyway, I use that to try to show them what we're up against as we do it. In addition to the fact that when you drive out of the driveway, you're looking at a 2-story house with washers and dryers in the front yard. But hey, you chose to build a house here, so that's the way it goes.
Mac, I have a silly question.
Sure.
Under schools, is buyer or nursing a seller, whatever the situation is, and they want to know what neighborhood is by a certain school, or if you go into the school tab, that pop up? around that school?
Okay, you're breaking out, Michelle. So under the schools, if we're looking for a specific neighborhood, we can do that.
Okay.
And when you actually plug in a street or an address, it'll show you the schools for that address also, both
Oh, okay.
both public and private.
Okay.
And I'll show you that here in just a little bit. So
Okay.
market activity is another one. This is just like the MLS portion that we were talking about. When you take a look at it, if I want to see new listings, I can click on that, and I can drop it down to new listings within the last 3 days, for example. And let's just use Corpus Christi, Texas. New listings in the last 3 days. And even though I'm not a member of that MLS, it's going to pull the new listings that have been put into the system. So once it goes into your MLS, it automatically gets fed up to RPR. In almost all the MLSs, they allow that now throughout the United States. So you'll have access to all of that information. And that's why, again, so in the last 3 days in Corpus, there's been 37 new listings in the system, which is not shabby, right? And this doesn't necessarily mean the Coastal Bend MLS, meaning Corpus Christi. It could be one of the other MLSs that's out there, or one of the other boards that's out there as well, right? So again, when we look at the market activity, that's similar to your MLS. You also have advanced. If you click on it, you can narrow that down. What do you want? Just like when I did that search right there, I eliminated mobile homes, farm, ranch, because that's what I had checked already. And you might want to come in and play with that a little bit. You can also do the search, bedroom, bath, square foot, all the good stuff, just like MLS is set up. Everybody good? All right, so the other part of this, when you're doing this, let me go to the home. Anytime you do a search, if you save a property, earlier I mentioned the star, right? So if I star a property, that becomes a saved property. And on the left-hand side, I can see all the different properties that I've saved or searches that I've done, custom areas that I've set up, or market activity that I've done. All of that is over here on the left-hand side. If I want to edit that, I have that opportunity. So these are properties that I've saved. Now I teach a lot of classes with it, so most of these don't mean anything. But if I wanted to, I can actually move these up and down in this ranking. So if I have one that's down here at the bottom, for example, and I want to keep it up at the top because I'm working on it, I can just go in here and grab it and move it up so that when I hit the save button over here on the left-hand side, it actually is one of the top ones I look at instead of having to go look for it, which is what I do sometimes because I teach classes and I still work with investors and stuff off and on. But so I'll move that property up here at the top so it stays fresh. Right? And that goes with all of these. So you have the saved here that you want to use. You have recent properties, right? Recent searches that you've done. Like I just did the one in Corpus Christi, so it shows there. Recent reports that you've ran. And we're going to take a look at the reports as well in this real quick. But the other thing I want to draw your attention to, you notice how this looks like a monitor right here, right? That's because we're doing it on the desktop. If we were doing it on the phone, it would look like phone, like that does right there. So that shows you that I looked at that property on my phone. And then here, you see how this one says Joe? When you do a search and you save it, you have the opportunity to name it whatever you want to name it, if you want to. And what I have found is that I find that to be more beneficial if I'm looking for somebody. Like this one was done on my phone at 3:12 in the morning, and I was sober. That's crazy. Yeah, no, just joking. Yeah. And this was for my brother-in-law in California. We were in Vegas together just recently, and that's why that's his name, Joe. I pulled his property up, take a look at it for him. This is in an area that he lives in. And we're trying to convince him to sell and move to Harlingen. Yes, get out of LA and come to the Valley. But that's the reason I have the name on it. So right here, you can see on the right-hand side, I have it gold starred, right? So I starred the property and I renamed it. You can do that with any of the properties that you pull up. Take a look at. Anybody have any questions there? All right, so we're going to actually go.
I have a question. And am I the only one that can see that when I rename it, or is it
Yes.
for everyone to see?
No, it's only you. This is all yours. So
Okay.
whatever you put in here, you don't have to worry about it unless you print it or email it to somebody.
Okay.
So if I pull a report off of that property and email it to him, it's going to show his name at the top of it like that.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to actually click on one of these properties so we can take a look at it. This is one of the properties in Mission that we were looking at earlier in the week, but a couple little things on here just to get us started. Somebody, when you ask about the school districts, for example, you take the right-hand side of this. So anytime you pull up a property, on the right-hand side, you're going to have the map, and we're going to come back to that one. You have historical information about the property. So you can compare records. And this is an important part of this because sometimes you can go in here and look and you'll see property's been sold 4, 5, 6 times. And you'll have all the information so that you can see what it was priced at and all the details. Were there any changes in square footage? What about the garage? Things like that. All the information you need on that property is right there so that you can compare the two of them.
Mac,
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to get, like what you just showed right now about all that information on the home? Are you able to get that same exact information like on Realtor.com?
You can get some of it, but you're not going to get all of it.
Okay.
The Realtor.com is only gets what the MLS is allowed to be fed, right? And RPR pulls from the public records. So for example, when I look at the historic records, right here's the public record on the right-hand side. So this is what they pulled out of the county clerk's office. And in other words, this is what's been recorded. And what you'll find sometimes, for example, since you asked that question, Michelle, right here, you see how this square footage is 2062?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if this was new construction, that's what the builder had filed. And that may not match what we have over here, because over here is what we have based on the appraisal sometimes. And there's going to be a difference between the two of them. Because a lot of times,
that's important.
Yes. A lot of times builders want to use the total slab, and that's not what we go by. We go by living square foot. And in fact, that's the case that I had mentioned up in San Antonio. There's a broker up there that has a complaint and a suit going against him right now. He's been working on it for 1.5 years because the buyer said that he misled them, because what he did was he took what the tax record showed as far as square footage, and that's what he used to market the property. Those tax records were incorrect because they were based on the builder's square footage. But the buyers had their own agent, and their agent should have given them a notice that being new construction, it's probably slab, so it's going to be different. And they should have used, there's a form for that to allow you to work around that. It's information from other sources is a form we want to use every time we work with a buyer, because we're going to give them tax records and MLS records, and they may not be accurate. And that, it's not going to prevent us from having a complaint or a lawsuit, but it will help us in those because we've done everything we can do. We can't be responsible for information that's not correct if we've done everything we can to provide the correct information. And that's what he had done. But instead of going after their agent, they went after him. He'll win because he only provided what the owner provided to him and what the tax record said. That's the one I shared the other day in training, company training, because one of the questions I found interesting, one of the questions was the Trek asked him whether he notified the county to let them know they had the wrong square footage or not. And that's not our job. But if I run into that again, I'll definitely notify the county.
And I'm sorry, you said the RPR is the one that implements the city information.
Right.
on here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So on, and we're going to look at this property all the way across, so you get a chance to see what I was talking about with it. On here, we're on the right-hand side because there's a question about schools. So here's the nearby schools for this particular property. And you have a couple elementary schools, which looks like there's some options with this, right? And then if you look, normally on here, so here are the 3 schools that are actually designed for it based on location. Right here in the center, you have the Benson Elementary, you have the junior high, and you have Sherryland High School. Those are the ones that are designed for that school based on transportation for the school district. Here are others that might be usable, so it's up to the buyer to check them out, right? So that's on the right-hand side. If you go down the layout on the property, on the top right here, on this one, we have an RVM. And RVM is Realtor Value Model. So AVM is another one you'll see. An AVM is an automated value model. That's like Zillow. And that's what comes out of about 300 different platforms. They take all this information and throw it in here and say, okay, based on what the computers are getting, that property should be worth this. So you'll see a recommended AVM, for example, with a price range and with some stars. In this case, we have an RVM, which is the AVM plus MLS. So it's pulling information from MLS and adding it into that equation. And the system is saying, this is what we think that property's worth. Again, it may be, this one has 5 stars. So I would say, in my practice, I would say that's a good price range. I'm still going to do a CMA, but at least I know where we should be at. But you can look at all the details. Like, for example, this detail right here is really important, where the RVM has dropped $2,400 in the last month. That's going to be important to the seller. But over the last 12 months, it also went up 14%. So in my opinion, if I was looking at this, my advice to the seller would be that situation we have is causing prices to go down a little bit, but the demand is going to keep them up high. So we're going to hit a medium in there with that. Also, if you click on view details, so we're talking about the RVM, if you click on view details, you'll actually see the properties that the system used to come up with that value. So they used 3 properties right here. That's how they came up with this RVM. That's what the computer selected based on what the system's been told. And we didn't tell it anything. It's what they have built into it. So then you also have pictures of the property. If there's not any MLS photos, what you'll end up with is a Google photo, right? Because Google has pictures of all of us.
So I have a question about the pictures.
Yes.
Let's say there's already pictures that are on here and you take over the listing, right, from someone else.
Right.
Are you able to implement your own pictures, or those have to stay on there that were presently there?
When you upload your photos into MLS, it'll take the most current photos. So if you pull a new listing, you upload pictures, it'll take those pictures. And it'll knock this one out, and it'll go in that historic information where we had it over here, right?
Okay.
So it'll show up there, like for example, on this property. If the property's never been in MLS, it'll show up on the historic side, and you'll have those pictures and stuff available here. Like this one shows no photos available for the listing information because it's not listed. It's off the market. All right, one other little tip for you is right here in these notes, just like we were talking about earlier. You can go in and put in notes in here on a property, and they're only for you. They're not for anybody else. You can add a note here if you wanted to as well, or you can upload photos. And I always, when I teach the advanced class on this, uploading photos will allow you to decide whether you want to keep it as a front photo or not on your reports. There's so many little things you can do with this. It's crazy. But just as an example, if I wanted to upload a picture on this property, so now I have a picture in here, right? If I wanted to edit, use for report covers, yes, right? Save it. Now it's saved as a cover photo. So if I do a report on this property, this picture is going to come up as the main picture instead of this one, right? And a lot of times if we're doing for sale by owners, for example, that's just a little trick that might help emphasize that you've actually seen the property. And I'll show you the report to use for that in a second. All right, so you have all the information down here. If the property's not what it says it is, so this is coming from the public, but I go over there and I look at it and it's only 1,800 square feet, I can make those changes. And it'll show up in my reports. Again, nobody else is going to see that from me. You have, this one is a distressed property, so it's about, it's going to be foreclosed on unless something happens. You have the legal description in here. Mortgage records. Mortgage records are pretty important because this will tell you what type of loan they had and how much that loan was when they bought the property. So in 2013, they had a loan for $192,000. It was an FHA, and the lender was Castle and Cook Mortgage. This information is really good if you're working for a buyer. Really good to help negotiate, because when I, and this is just a technique, that's all it is. If I'm working for a buyer and they pick out a property and say, this is the one I want to go in here and I'm going to look at this. I'm going to look at the loan amount that the seller had versus the list price. Where are we at? And if there's a huge gap there, then we have, in my mind, we have some negotiating room. We just have to hit the right buttons to make that work. But there's all kinds of good information in here for that. Any questions on that one? Now you notice how up here all of a sudden we have in red refined value, right? And that's because we made changes down here on the square footage. As soon as we made changes in the square footage, it made a change in the value of the property. Not, again, that only one that can see that is me. So you click on the history. History is going to tell you what else is going on with that property. It's going to give you pricing, prior sales transactions, all kinds of good information. In fact, I had some investors tell me that we have too much information at our fingertips because it will tell you, it won't show the sold price, but again, we have the loan amount that they had on it.
Max, so now that the value has changed, the refined value,
Sure.
what price are we going to give to the buyer?
Right.
Because do we go by the RVM or the refined?
If I was doing a market analysis on the property, if let's say, just to look at this real quick, if this property was listed at 251, remember this property is not even on the market, right? But if it was listed at 251 and I go through it and I do a CMA, and we should do a CMA for every buyer, then that's what I'm going to recommend to the buyer. Yes, the seller and the listing agent decided 251, but based on everything I'm looking at, it's only worth 222. So I recommend you offer somewhere between here and here.
Okay.
You owe it to your buyer to do that. And if you get really good at doing CMAs, you want to do that because that appraisal is going to be based on the same thing. You're looking at the same thing that the appraiser is going to look at. You don't know that the listing agent and the seller did that. And in fact, one of the agents we used to have at C21 years ago had listed a property, and I went up to her and I'm like, I see you got a new listing, but how did you come up with that price? And her response was, that's what the seller said they wanted. And she was one of those agents that we had issues with from time to time. My next question with her was, did you do a CMA for the seller to let them know that that's way overpriced? I mean, it wasn't just overpriced, it was way overpriced. She goes, well, of course I did. That property you set on the market for almost 2 years and never sold, and then it was withdrawn, and I never kept up with it after that, but we had it for almost 2 years. Our company had it for almost 2 years, never sold. It's all about the right price. And if we don't have the right price on it, on the listing side, then it's going to cause us to have an appraisal that's under list price. And if the buyer's agent didn't do their job, then we're going to have to make some adjustments on the sales price. So as a buyer's agent, always, always, always do a CMA. Always do it. But
Does
you're
that
gonna-
happen a lot, Mac? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Does that happen a lot?
As far as the pricing goes, not in a big way. In other words, there's not going to be a big difference because most agents are pretty good about doing a CMA for the seller. I mean, but at the same time, I've taken listings that are overpriced, and I usually talk about that in the GRI classes because I've taken listings that are overpriced based on the fact that it was a referral. Like I had 3 of them here in La Feria that I had for about 2 years. And they were a referral from another agent who said, just go to Mac, he'll take care of it. He'll get it sold for you. We're talking $25,000 to $30,000 properties, right? But they wanted $50,000 for them. And I argued and argued about it, but finally it was like, you know what, let's just put it on the market. We'll see what happens. And it took me about 2 years before we sold them. But anyway, and you did, so you don't want to do that because that also creates a bad name for you. That's the only ones I have taken like that are the ones that were referrals from other agents. And that agent deals with high-end properties, so she did not want low-price properties, which makes sense. I'll take anything, right? That's my job is just to get it sold. All right, so on here you also have charts. You can take the time to go through and take a look at this. This is what I was talking about, though. It gives you a ton of information that you could use as you're coming up with, because every CMA, every appraisal are going to be different. It may be a little bit or maybe a lot, but we could take everybody that's here today and do a CMA, and I promise you on the same property, same comps, and I promise you we're going to come in with price differences because it's all based on experience, knowledge, and what we think is important, right? And there's a whole lot that goes into that. When we're doing the GRI class, one of the things we talk about is what's trending. What's trending in the market? What's going up? Like some people want outdoor kitchens. Some don't want outdoor kitchens. So if you have an outdoor kitchen, is that good or bad? And that's going to be based on your experience and what you know about the market. One of the things you can do is look in MLS and see what they're doing. Properties with outdoor kitchens, just as an example, but to help do that. All right, so here's the refined value. Remember when I made that price change on the square footage, it changed the value of the property? So this is another area where we can do that. If there's any differences, we can make changes here. If the owner says, if you're looking at taking a listing and the owner says, I've updated the bathroom, for example. So we've updated a bathroom. Here's some information on it. So take the time to read it. When did you do that? Oh, I did it 2 years ago. Okay. So June of 2018, what did you pay for it? 15 grand. Okay. So you spent 15,000 2 years ago to update the bathroom. And the reason this is important is because a lot of times sellers will tell you that they want to get back what they spent on it, and they're not going to. They're not going to get that, right? And in fact, on the listing side, there's 3 questions you should always ask a seller when you first talk to them. One is, why are they selling? Number 2 is, how soon do they need it sold by? And number 3 is, based on what you know, what do you think your property's worth? And I've been using that since 2001. It works really well. All you have to do is make it a part of what you do, right? On that last one, if you ask, what do you think your property's worth? I will tell you 90% of the time what I get is, that's the reason I'm hiring you. That's the reason I'm talking to you. I thought you'd tell me. So you have to figure out your response. Mine is, it's like a canned response. If they were to say, that's the reason I'm hiring you, well, great, I appreciate that. However, I also know you didn't just wake up this morning and decide to sell your house. So where do we need to be at? And what they'll tell you is we paid this, but we did this, this, and this. So this is what we want, which is what you were asking them. But they have to work through that, right? And what they're going to do is they want, based on my experience, they're going to want that 15,000 that they spent remodeling this 2 years ago. They're going to want that 15,000 back, but they're not going to get it, right? Because it's not market value. And that's where this tool comes in. So when I click on add, that 15,000 2 years ago today is only worth 8,000. And it adds it up here as well, right? So it makes the adjustments for you. So you can go through it, and even this scale down here at the bottom, you can make adjustments. Like if you're selling something that has a great view, that adds value to it, right? In fact, here you can see it added 16,000 just for having a great view. But your definition of a great view and my definition of a great view might be two different things. So you have to look at all aspects of it. But using to do a CMA, but using this, that gives you the basics of it. Everybody good there? Then you can also do a comp analysis in here. What I would ask you to do is when you click on this, what you will have is comparative market analysis. That's what you're going to have marked on here. What I would ask you to do, and we'll do a CMA class here later on, but what I ask you to do is switch it over to sales comparison analysis. This box is going to open up asking for your appraisal license. You don't have that. So just click skip this. And the reason you want to do that is you want to have access to more details. And this is going to do everything for you if you'll just practice with it. You can confirm the facts. We're not going to make any changes. We're just going to run through this real quick. We're going to confirm the facts. You're going to go out and find comps. The system will go find comps for you. When you're finding comps, by the way, what you want are sold comps. An appraiser uses 3 sold comparables, and that's what you want. So you go out, you make adjustments in the criteria, you click on search, the system will go find those for you based on your criteria. And then when you click on them, you'll add them to this box on the right-hand side. And I'm not doing anything worthwhile with this. I'm just showing you how it works. You update your valuation. You can use as many as you want. The appraiser has to have 3. So you have to look at them in detail, right? So you have your 3 comps selected, and you can, again, you can select more than that if you want. You go in to make adjustments. In this workbook, you can make adjustments for all aspects of it. What I want to show you real quick with this is down here at the bottom, here's adjusted value of comps, right? So like this one's at 172. And notice the weighting down here, comp weighting. So we're going to go back up here to bedrooms. This one is 3 bedrooms versus the subject property is 4. So we need to do what? Anybody?
Change it to 4?
Yeah.
Or change it to 3?
So we can't, the subject property is a 4 bedroom. We can't change the properties, but we can adjust. So what's the value of a bedroom? And that's going to vary depending on where you're at as well. So just for instruction purposes, I'll show you just real quick. So what we need to do is add to this, because what we're trying to do is make the comparable property, the comparable property, the same as the subject property, right? So then
Doesn't the appraiser, doesn't he subtract and doesn't he add to make it equal to the subject property?
right, and that's what you're going to do.
Okay.
You need to do a CMA with those adjustments.
Okay.
You need to do a CMA with the adjustments. And I have a sheet. Actually, it's in our Facebook groups for the offices. There's a sheet in there that will allow you to actually get some ideas. And that's all it is, an idea. Let's say, for example, a bedroom, in this case, I decide that it's worth $10,000. So by adding $10,000 over here, and it's added because you can see it blue, that makes this property the same as the subject property as far as the bedroom goes. But when you come down here to the bottom, you'll see how it's done adjustments. The system does that for you. So you don't have to, and you can put a note in here. adjusted. You know, and you can look at, you have to go through and look at each one of these. So on the two little dots where I said change from comps to cells, you want to use the cell portion so you can go in here and do the detail. This is the details that a lot of agents do not do, which causes their CMAs to be off. And this is what you want to get into. The better you become at this, the better you'll be able to list a property and sell it in a reasonable time. Anyway, so you go in here, you make your adjustments on all the properties, and then you update valuation and close. You can go in and review it if you want, or you can create a report. And if you create the report, what you're creating is a valuation workbook. So the valuation workbook, if you look at it, can be really, really long. So you can go in here and decide what pages you want. You put the cursor over the little icon, it'll tell you what it is. Like there's an aerial map. There's the history on the property in that area. You go down through here and you just click run the report and it'll run it for you. When the reports run, just to give you a real quick, here's a seller's report and here's a property report. These are all different reports you can use. The one I love and use a lot of is this property flyer report. If that property was on the MLS, it would already have text in here and I could use that property. I highly recommend using this for prospecting, but you have to be careful the way you do it. If I was door knocking, which we've done, I can print these off and say, this property just came on the market, right? It does not have to be my listing. It could be yours. It could be somebody from Coldwell Banker, somebody from KW, or whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as I'm not saying I didn't list the property. However, there's a difference between door knocking and internet. I cannot publish somebody else's listing to the internet without their permission. And the reason I share that with you is if I create this property flyer, right? Just like any of the other reports, if I create that, so here's a property flyer I did on this property here for one of the classes. If I click on the little orange dot, the plus sign, I can download the report, I can rerun it, or I can share it on Facebook. So when I go over to Facebook, it'll pull up that property flyer, and that's what you see on the screen right now, and allow me to share that if I wanted to. But I'm not going to share it unless it's my listing or I have permission. And by the way, there's the property flyer, just like one we just created. So it has my information. It says listing courtesy of. And here I was teaching a class. In fact, this was the Laredo class. And I was showing them how to do what I just explained to you guys. You can create open house flyers out of that, whatever you want to do. All this information that you see, the map, the picture, the description, this description came from MLS. So if it's a listed property, if somebody just listed it, and that's a great farming tool, by the way. If an agent from another company just listed a property in a subdivision I'm trying to work, because yesterday we were talking about market area. If an agent from the local area listed a property in a subdivision I'm trying to work, I could go in and create this property flyer and go door knocking. That's what we used to do in Austin. I'd go door knocking and say, hey, this property just came on the market. Do you know anybody that might be interested in buying or selling in the area? Yes or no? If they say no, then I have the opportunity to ask them about, well, what about people you work with, people you go to church with? What about that? No, nobody. Okay, well, when's the last time you thought about selling? Right? There's scripts to go with that. But anyway, using RPR, you can get there's a lot of tools in here. Here's that valuation workbook that we just did. Obviously, they're not for sale. Well, they might be for the right price. That's our three boys, but they. Anyway, and it gives you all the property information. So, and if you look at it, it's 42 pages on that particular one, right? And here's where you made your change. Remember, I changed the 1800 on the square footage. It shows everything you did to it is going to be in there. Here's where I made the $10,000 adjustment, right? And this is what you sat down with the seller with and tell them this is what you think the property is worth based on information that you have in the system. Or the buyer, this might be a good area where a good price range. Where do you want to be at? And giving them advice. And again, just using this system. At the very end of this, it tells you about the valuation workbook and how it works, which is really good because this is the information that helps the owner understand. We're not just coming up with numbers. This is what we're doing. And it adds more value to it. Everybody good?
So you were saying that this is for not only prospects, but it's also can be used for a seller to show them information, or no?
Right.
Is it just for, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime you go to take a listing, if I call you and say, can you come and help me list my property or help me sell my property? You're going to ask the 3 questions. You're going to look at the tax records. You're going to do a market analysis. And that market analysis would be done in this system. If you're representing the buyer, you can do a search for the buyer. You can pull information about the property, and then you go out and take a look at it and come back and do a CMA for that buyer on this system. So there's a lot of different options there that you can work with. Investors love this because I can pull up foreclosure properties. There's all kinds of different options with it as well that you can work with. I'm on RPR almost every day looking at property in the area. See what's going on. Because there's so much information in here. Two last little things. Well, 3 last little things real quick. When we talk about neighborhood, for example, what we should be able to do is plug in a subdivision and pull up information. So when we're looking at neighborhoods, here's what it went to is Harlingen 78552. So there's the estimated value range, change in the value over the last year, homes for sale, median price. These are stats that we can use as our mail out. Like yesterday we were talking about the building that subdivision, and I mentioned the fact to send out stats. That's one of the things I used to do in Austin. I was taught to do that up there. Average list price, sales price, average days on the market, all that. And you have all that right here. Where back then we actually had to sit down and figure it all out. We have all of that right in here now. So it makes it real easy. And that's based on just neighborhoods. You also have schools. So if you go in and plug in schools, for example, schools in Corpus Christi, Texas, just as an example. Come on. Okay. So it's going to give us the school. It's going to show us how the school is rated, and there's some information about the property. See reviews on the school. That's what I was talking about. Those are your like Google reviews on the school. So this one doesn't have any. And then it also shows properties that are nearby, because occasionally a buyer will say, I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but I want something close to that school. So that's one way of identifying them. The other way is just to go to the map And on the map, and by the way, you can go to the map from any one of those. You can go to the map. So that school is already in there, right? Let's see. I'm going to go back to just the map, for example, so you can see it real quick. All right, so this is going to show all the schools down here as well, right? We have it on the map. But if we wanted to fine tune it, here we can go in, okay, show me all the 6th to the 8th grade. And see how I drew the lines across there? So, and when I click on it, it's going to tell me who that belongs to. So it helps us select the area. So now that I have that, right here it says search. So if the buyer said I want to live where my kids can go to Dorothy Middle School or Grant Middle School, so now I can go in here and do a search for it, just based on that. It makes it so easy to do. And here they have no results on it. But one of the other ones that we have here with this, you have all these items above here. So you have everything from schools, the schools, the zip codes, etc. All that is in here. On this side, on the bottom side, we have the heat maps. So the heat maps, for example, will show us everything from flood zones to average sales price. So the dark blue areas are the higher price homes. Or we could do average list price. We could do the flood zones. So on the maps, there's a lot of opportunity to use those as well. Any questions over anything we covered there? So one of the last things is this little hat, if you will. You can click on that for learning. You can click on here for learning, right? Or you can go down to the bottom of it and click on learning down here. All of those are tied to learning. And there's a video library here for you. So you can click on agent, and here's all the videos that you could possibly use for RPR. That'll keep you busy all night, Friday night, right there. And if you want to learn what the appraiser looks for, click on that one, take a look at it. So you know how they're doing what they're doing. Okay. All right. Any questions about anything we talked about? Pretty quick, a lot of information. No? Everybody good? All right, well, if you have any questions, all of you know how to get in touch with me, I believe. You can always shoot me a text or an email. I'll do what I can to help you with it. I love RPR, as you can tell. I've actually, I'm the MLS chair in McAllen, and every now and then they will remind me that there's a purpose of MLS, which there is. That's so we can put information in it and go to RPR. You have to have a way to get that information there. But I love it. When it first came out, I was board president in Harlingen, and when it first came out, I wasn't. I worked into that. When it first came out, we chose not to go with RPR. The board did. Chose not to work with it, not to let our information go up there. And it was based on information we were provided. And as I learned more, once I became president and stuff, we made some changes. And one of the changes we made was to allow all that information to go out. Now Harlingen is actually with RGV MLS, they've actually restricted information that goes out. So I'm not a member of the RGV MLS, so I can't see their sold information, for example, which I think is ridiculous, but that's just my opinion. They're not the only ones. Other MLSs have it set up that way as well. And in fact, some MLSs, you can see a property is on the market, but you can't even see what it's on the market for, which is crazy. Because we're all in this.
Why is that, Mac?
There's people that are very, very protective about their information. And there's this, if you're not a part of us, we don't want to share with you routine, which is insane. But you would think, since if you're a realtor in Nebraska and I'm in Texas, and you know somebody who wants to move to Texas, you might go on here to take a look to see what's available. I mean, I go here before I go. When somebody asked about Realtor.com earlier, I go to Realtor.com probably once or twice a month. That's about it. But I'm here every day on RPR every day. See what's going on in different areas.
I have a question. I don't know if you're able to answer this, but when you register for the MLS, like here locally, it's the Corpus Christi Association of Realtors. Does that include it? Is that
Yes.
a bundle? Okay.
Yeah, it's a part of our NAR dues and stuff. It covers this. Let me show you one other thing just real quick on it, because we had asked about it earlier. This is on that same property, right? So if I go across this, I did not go across this part of it. I did the refined value and the comp analysis, that thing. But if you click on neighborhood, that's the one that'll show you all the off the wall things about that area also. So when I click on neighborhood, then the tabs change again. So now I have housing, people, economy, and quality of life. And that's what I was getting at earlier on the people side of it. And there's all kinds of charts in here for it. On the people side of it, it breaks them down by age group and etc. There you go. Male versus female, education levels, age groups, household incomes, all that, right down to their voting pattern. So there's a lot of good information in here. And the reason I think, my reason for showing that is, and we don't want to get into telling somebody this might be a better area for your steering, right? We don't want to get into that. But occasionally somebody will say, I'm looking for an area that's nice and quiet. Well, I can go in here and get this, and then I can create a report and send it to them. And, because what's your definition of quiet versus my definition of quiet? Right? Two different things. And you may run across some knucklehead that'll cause you to want to choke somebody, and that's illegal. So don't do that. Because I had my wife and I were working repos. We had a repo over here in Fair Park in Harlingen. That's a area that's lower income. It's where we built our police station, right? They always do that in areas that aren't necessarily a good area. And our community area is there as well. We had a repo property right next to the railroad track. It's probably worth maybe $10,000 or $12,000, not very much. It was just a skeleton. Didn't have the walls weren't finished on the inside. Most of the outside wasn't finished, that kind of thing. There's a guy that found it online. He was actually lived in Corpus Christi, or said he did, and was wanting to move down here. And I'm talking to him. I've talked to him on the phone several times. That property pops up. He goes, I want to buy that property. I'm like, okay, well, you need to come down and take a look at it, because that used to be one of my main things. Back then I didn't sell anything sight unseen. I want you to come down and take a look at it. He goes, no, I want to buy it. And he said, I just want to make sure that it's not in that area where it's around Mexicans. Like, what? I put him on hold, and I go, here, you need to talk to somebody else real quick. And then my wife talked to him. I never heard from him again. So I don't know what she told him, but it's okay. So know that you're going to run across that, but you don't want to get involved in that at all. And sometimes that can be created by just little things. So giving them information, let them make the decision, is really important. And that's another reason why I love RPR like it is. I can provide all kinds of information, let them make that decision. Anyway, I appreciate you guys' time. Anybody need anything else? Questions, comments?
Thank you. I learned a lot.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. If you guys ever need anything,
Yeah,
just
thank
reach
you,
out.
Mac. That was very informative.
Appreciate it, man. You guys have a great day. Go write some contracts.